Hello, my name is Eitan Blumin. This is my second tutorial for DocumentDB. If you still didn't see the first one, please do. You can find the link in the description below. In the first tutorial, we saw how to basically work with the Azure DocumentDB portal, how to connect to the DocumentDB databases and collections, and work with those. What we're going to do now is we're going to see how we work with the documents themselves. Right, so since the last tutorial, there were a few new additions to the DocumentDB library. So if you still have the old library, or perhaps not at all, so you'll have to go to your project, right-click on it, go to Manage NuGet Packages, and one of the new things is that congratulations, DocumentDB is no longer pre-release, so it is available in the stable as a stable version as well. So we can search for that here, and we can find it right here. This is the one we need, Microsoft Azure DocumentDB Client Library. Okay, so if you don't have the latest version installed, you'll see an install button here, like this one. So you just click on it, go ahead with the instructions, and then you're good to go. Okay, so let's see what we're going to do now. First of all, you should add these two libraries to your project. We'll use the first one to work with files, and we'll use the JSON library to work with a bit with the JSON document. Okay, so let's get started. Right. So first thing is POCO. POCO is a plain old class object. It's basically basic class objects of .NET, and we'll take a look at the definition of this class that I created called my object class, and it has a few fields here, as you can see, and one list of recursive items, I guess you can call it that. I called it children, right? So let's go back to our program, see what we do with it. Okay, so I create one object, put some data in there, and then I'll use the create document async method. Now please pay attention that this is here commented out is the old way of how you would have done this, using the self link of the collection, which you'd have to get by first querying for the collection, which you in turn would be able to do only if you had a self link of the database of the database. So you'd have to first query the database. It's a whole mess. So one of the new things that DocumentDB did is add this thing here. This is a URI parameter. URI is basically sort of a shortcut to the object that you want to get. In this case, it's a collection. So we just use the URI factory static class. It has a few static methods that create URI links, right? So we use this one, create document collection URI. This is the URI for the collections. It gets two parameters, database ID and collection ID, and turns sort of a formatted URI, okay, as to be used to access this collection ID that's specified. Okay, so instead of using the self link of the collection, we just use the URI for the collection. So we use the same method. It's a simply new overload function, right? We have the old one, and this is the new one with the URI. Okay. So we send as the first parameter the URI for the collection, and the second parameter is our POCO object. And this returns the created document, right? After it's inserted into the DocumentDB. Next, we'll see how we query a document. So this is a link query using the lambda parameters, right? using the where method as a numerable first or default. It's very similar to what we did in the previous tutorial using collections and databases, right? Um, so let's say we got this document that we just inserted, and what we want to do is we want to change it, right? We want to update this document. So we got the old version, and we did the change to it. In this case, I added an item in the children list, right? And then I'm going to use the method replace document async, which again gets as the first parameter the URI, this time of the document, right? Database collection document, and then the document object itself. This will replace the the previous document. So let's put a breakpoint here, and then we'll see what happens. I'm gonna run it. Let's see. Okay. So we got here. This means that the document was created. So let's see how it looks like in the portal. I'm gonna go to the Azure portal. Yeah, I need to reload my session. Okay. We open the DocumentDB account. We go to the list of databases over here. We go to the list of collections. It should be coming up. Okay. And then we go to the Document Explorer down here. Here we should see all the documents inside the collection that I selected. Here's the one that I just created. And this is what it looks like, right? So now let's step forward in this debug mode, and we'll see what happens after I update the document. Let's see, I'm gonna close this one. I'm gonna refresh this. Yeah. And there it is. There's the children field, and under it, another item. Great fun. So let's move on. Next up, we'll see how to create something that's called a dynamic. A dynamic is a sort of a ad hoc class, I guess you can call it. It's a class that you create without first declaring it as a separate class in your program. We just generate it like this. And we can also create documents out of dynamic object as well. It's very similar. I mean, the creation of the object is basically the only different thing here, almost. Other than that, we still use the create document async method using the URI factory method to get the collection URI, and then we set the object. And this is how we read it. There's a big, tiny itsy bitsy difference here. You see, this time we need to get the resource property from the document that is returned here, right? It's still read document async, the same one that we used earlier, and we still send the document URI, right? But this time when we want to use the resource property, this returns the actual document object as something that we can use in a dynamic class, right? So again, we will make a change here, and what we will do is we'll add a field, right? This is called ship date. Please pay attention, there's no such field here, right? This is something completely new that I'm adding. And you know what, let's see how it looks like in the portal right now. Refresh it again. I didn't update the document yet, so let's see how it looks like. Okay, so this is before the update. You see there's no ship date here. I'm gonna do this and then execute the replace document async method. refresh this. And we'll see it showed up here as a new field. Right. So the next thing we're gonna see is how to work with files. This time we're going to see how we load documents from files. Perhaps we have lots of JSON text files that we want to load. Each one would be a separate document, whatever. Okay, so we use standard system IO methods to get our files. We use directory info to get the directory object, then enumerate files to get the list of files ending with JSON, and then we look for each file and open up a file stream object. This opens up the file itself and returns the content. And then we use again the create document async method. Instead of the where we would normally put the document object, this time we use resource load from, which would return for us a document object. We let it know that the object that is returned is of the type document. And this would create the document in DocumentDB. And we do this for all the free files that we have in our directory. Let's see, we have files here. These are the 3 files. Let's take a look at one of them. As we can see, we have an attribute here. One thing that I forgot to emphasize, that in order for an easy retrieval of documents, you need to have an ID attribute in your document. You may have noticed that in all of our previous objects, I had this field. You see, ID with a small I, and here too, ID with a small I, ID with a small I, right? You gotta have this field, otherwise DocumentDB will create one itself and will populate it with an automatically generated value. But if you want to easily access your documents, it's recommended to be in control of the IDs that are created for your documents. So it's best if you have this, if you create this attribute yourself. Remember, ID with a small I. Okay, so we load all of these files, right? And then we're going to see how we return it. So we return these documents as we normally would, using the create document query method, right? We can also use this the URI here, the document URI instead of the self link. This in this case it's a link query, right? And another thing we can do is use the JSON convert library in order to serialize the object as a JSON document. And then we could use our JSON library to do all sorts of manipulations on the document and do whatever changes we want, and then load it back. In this case, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to do like a basic manipulation of the strings. And what I'm going to do is create a memory stream object and invent sort of a new document from scratch with the same ID, purchase order number, but a new field this time called status with the value cancelled. This field doesn't exist in our original document, and we can also see that all of the other fields also don't exist here. But whatever we create here and put into the method replace document async will replace the document that we specified here in the first parameter, just like I showed you in the previous examples. Okay, so last but not least, what we have left to do now is show how to work with attachments, right? So let's say we create a document here as we normally would using the create document async. This time it's dynamic again. And this time I'm going to use file stream again to load some text files. Okay, we have these text files here, right? We have this one, very long text file, and another small one. And we're going to load them using file stream and a method called create attachment async. This method receives as the first parameter the URI of the document for which we want to add the attachment. So as normally we would use the create document URI of the URI factory. And as the second parameter, instead of as we normally would say send the document object, this time we send the file stream. It expects a stream object. So this is what we're going to give it. And we can add as the third optional parameter the media options, which has two attributes: the content type, where we can tell if it's a text plain or maybe it's a binary or whatever, and the slug, which basically tells it what is the ID or name of the attachment. So we're gonna add that, and we're gonna add the other file. Basically, the same thing happens here. Okay, and then we're gonna see how do we query these attachments, right? We added them to the database. How do we now use them? So we can use the method called create attachment query, almost the same thing as the create document query. It receives as a parameter the identification of the document for which we want to get the attachment, either a self-link or the URI of the document, doesn't matter. And if we activate the as enumerable method on it, we can use it in for each loop like this. We could also use the first or default method on the enumerable like this. Where is it? There it is. This one, right? And then we can just return the first one into a single variable. But here I'm going to show you how to do it for each loop on these things. Okay, so we got an attachment object like this from this method, create attachment query, from the results. And now we're going to do is create a media content object for which we will read the media asynchronously for this attachment. We need to send the media link. The media link is basically the sort of a URI, but not exactly. I think it's a URI for the media content itself, because this object doesn't include the attachment itself. It's only metadata, one of which is the media link, which will help us get the content itself, right? So this method read media sync is what helps us get the content. We save it in this variable, and then we declare a byte array in the length of the media content length, and then we read the content into this byte array. This is very similar to how you would read a file stream or a memory stream into a byte array. Very similar concept, using the media content variable .media.read async, and then the byte array variable, beginning, end, and so on. And then we can take this byte array, convert it to a Unicode string, and then we use it however we like. In this case, I simply print the first 25 characters. Let's get here and run this. Let's see what happens. Right. So this is the content of the first file, right? And if I run again, I will see the content of the second file. This is the first 25 characters, right? Right, it's very simple. So this basically wraps it up for the topic of working with DocumentDB documents. And the last thing we have left to do is delete. How to delete a document. So we have this method here, delete document async, which receives as a parameter either a self link of the document or the URI. That's it. There's nothing else to it. It deletes simply the document with the ID that we specified. If this document doesn't exist, of course it will throw an exception, and that's it. We're done. Now, I of course didn't go into full detail about most of the things here, but this is a good place to start, to get you started, and you can of course look for more information on the official DocumentDB website and tutorials, and there's a large reference for all of these methods and classes and objects. So I'll see you next time when we see what other kind of fun stuff we can do with DocumentDB. Goodbye.